And welcome into this week's edition of the Insiders Podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jenna Harner from WPXI. He's Mike DeFabo, Steelers beat writer for The Athletic. And Mike, the Steelers are back. The sun has set on training camp in Latrobe. The Steelers are back in Pittsburgh. We are also back in Pittsburgh. I'm going to miss it. I'm gonna miss it. I'm not gonna miss the rain, but I'm gonna miss Sharkies. I'm gonna miss the chicken wings. I'm gonna miss the Meadows custard that I got to try for the first time. I'm gonna miss parts of it for sure.
Shout out to Meadows. Yeah. Mom has been hyping the Meadows. And back in the day, you used to have to get like a calendar and she would put that on her refrigerator. And when black cherry was on the menu that day, she made sure to go out and get a pint. Now I think you can just get all kinds of things. And like Rogers Realm has a special flavor. Aaron Rodgers has a special flavor. I think Ben Skoranek got a special flavor. So it's not Mom's Meadows anymore. They've definitely taken things up a notch.
The one in Monroeville, I think they still follow that calendar because every time I drive by when I'm going to Giant Eagle, which how much of a true Pittsburgher do I sound like here? They have the flavors listed. Nutella was one of the ones today.
Yeah, that's the one that Mom goes to. But it was nice to try the one by Sharkies because our friends at Sharkies also own that. So great times.
Shout out to Sharkies. But let's talk some football as that's what the people are here for. The Steelers' first preseason game is in the books. They're gearing up for the game 2 of the preseason against the New York Jets on Friday. And I think there was a lot of excitement surrounding this first game, especially surrounding Drew Allar, who I thought played a very impressive, got his first, true taste of NFL action and looked impressive given the circumstance, given what we saw out there. I thought he was very decisive with a lot of his decisions. I feel like obviously when you're scoring 3 touchdowns, there's a lot to look at. And I think you really can see the foundation he's really built from his quarterback school that he's been working with under Mike McCarthy from the time he got here, starting with rookie minicamp.
Yeah, so there's important context to all of this, okay? And I know that the hype train is rolling, and I'm not trying to slow it down in any sort of a way. I did a film study at The Athletic, and a couple things that really stuck out to me. The Packers were playing preseason defense. And what I mean by that is a lot of static looks where what Drew Allar saw before the snap is what he got after the snap. No coverage disguises, no post-snap safety rotations. And so a lot of it was just straight up single high man coverage or quarters coverage that stayed quarters coverage if it was too high. Within that, the Steelers also aren't going to show the entire NFL their entire playbook. And they also aren't going to give a rookie everything to digest and execute in this first game. So, a lot of what they did of the 10 completions, 4 of them were the dragon concept, which is just a fancy name, West Coast term for slant flat. And then 2 more were stick concept. So that's a long way of saying basically there were a lot of vanilla looks from the Packers defense and a lot of reads where Drew Allar is basically picking his side. And then even within that, choosing one defender that then he's kind of reading based on what they do. And then he's picking between 2 options. So he's still, I think, in this next game, you're going to want him to eventually show greater diversity of offensive scheme, a greater ability to dissect coverages when he gets those different types of looks. But given the circumstances, I think he basically played about as well as you could have possibly hoped for.
And I think between both him and Will Howard, and we'll get to Will Howard momentarily, but I think they really both showed me a lot of composure because both of them looked the best we'd seen them look up to that point in training camp. There have been moments of training camp with some highs and some lows, as we've been talking about. And again, yes, it is very vanilla defense. It is very basic plays. But again, I think the execution part of it, and that was what Mike McCarthy wanted to see from these guys too. And that I think they executed in the ways that they needed to in order to obviously make plays, but to again build on the foundations of what we've been seeing from them throughout training camp up to this point. So moving to preseason game 2, where again, I think there are some more unanswered questions and we don't entirely know who the Jets are going to play or what we're going to see from the Jets in that way. But for you, when you look at what Drew Allar needs to do in this second preseason game, because again, we anticipate he's probably going to get a lot of playing time here. To me, obviously, I think he needs to build on what we saw from that first game, and obviously, I kind of feel like that's face value. But what else do you want to see from him in the second game?
Yeah, I kind of addressed it before, but I'd like to just see him executing a greater diversity of concepts
Yeah,
against more challenging defense. And I'm not sure that we'll necessarily get it because, again,
yeah.
the Steelers aren't going to want, with their third team offense, to show opponents and put on film more of their plays. So I still think that maybe it's going to be limited in terms of how difficult the defense is, the types of plays or the diversity of the scheme that the Steelers run. But, one thing that maybe I would like to see is just continued accuracy over a larger sample size. One of my concerns about Drew Allar, watching him every day in training camp, was his accuracy. And specifically, there were a lot of layups, like throws into the flat, slants, those kinds of things, like throws that should be kind of easy for a quarterback that he was just missing because of his accuracy. And I think that with the quarterback school, since it's so detailed in the footwork, having a repeatable delivery is going to give him the opportunity to be accurate. And so I think just continuing to show that he's made progress with his footwork and that these changes that Mike McCarthy has made are going to be permanent. And I think just then showing with his accuracy, that's where really you're going to, while you're going to be looking at his feet and making sure everything looks clean, everything looks natural, where the ball goes and him delivering it consistently with a repeatable motion, that's going to really be the test. And that's going to tell you if he's doing those things correctly with his lower half.
And the footwork part of it to me too is something I want to see more of too in this game. And I know that that is just like a very, small part of everything that goes into what Drew Allar is doing as a quarterback. But there was, when we were talking with him after the game, I believe our good friend Chris Carter asked him about, like, there was a moment that you could kind of tell he got a little bit of happy feet. But I think, Drew Allar had said afterward, he basically was like, yeah, that's something I'm not going to be happy about that I put on film. I'm going to have to go back and watch it and things. But I think the recognition of that is such a big part of that basic growth, again, just from what this coaching staff is trying to do in terms of how they're, building Drew Allar's mechanics into the way that they want it to be. So that's going to be something I'm really kind of watching for too, is okay, if there are moments where, his footwork is going well, if there are moments where it's not the best and that causes an errant throw or that causes a bad pass, that is going to be something that I think I'm kind of really watching for. Let's talk Will Howard too, because obviously we got to talk about the quarterback two battle that I don't entirely feel like is a battle right now. And I thought Will Howard also played well. I thought, for me, watching that first game, there were some more highs and lows aren't the right word, but there were moments I really liked, and there were other moments where just the offense as a whole wasn't kind of clicking when Will Howard was out there. But I thought there were, again, he felt decisive to me in most of the moments, and there was some plays that you and I had been we were talking about in the press box at halftime, but that 2-minute drill, there was a very noticeable Will Howard going through his progressions, going that first, second, third read. And to me, that was a tremendous sign.
Yeah, and I really liked his pocket movement on the penultimate throw that then ultimately, set up the touchdown,
Yeah.
where he kind of hitched up in the pocket, felt the pressure, and then delivered it to Robert Tonyan. And after the game, he was talking about how that's something that just kind of happens. It's not something you think about. It becomes second nature. And that's one of the big drills the Steelers do in the QB school is Tom Arth is constantly running at these guys with a pad, and they're working on throwing off of quick movement. And Aaron Rodgers is so good at that, about just getting the ball out quickly when he just takes a little subtle step, gets his feet where he needs to be to deliver a good pass. And so you saw some of that from 2-minute Will. You like that?
Nice. That was good. That was nice there.
Um,
Enjoyed that.
but as you mentioned, Mike McCarthy, he said that there were some peaks and some valleys. And so
Yeah.
some of the valleys, McCarthy kind of gave more context to that this week. And he said there was a time or two that a receiver didn't run the right route.
Mm.
And that's not on Will. And that is
No.
going to make him look bad, or that's going to be a tough moment for him. I don't know if that was the one where maybe he had to scramble out of the pocket. But McCarthy seemed to think that was a positive in the way that Will was able to handle it. I think that maybe the low point for Will was his final throw, I think, on third down. The receiver was really blanketed, and there was no room to fit the ball in. And luckily, the throw was a bit errant and a bit high, because I think if he had delivered an accurate pass, it would have been turnover worthy play. So
Yeah.
I think just I'm sure he feels pressure and feels like he has to perform in order to supplant Mason Rudolph and prove that he can be that quarterback too. The tough thing for Will is to still play within himself and
Yeah.
to understand that part of being a successful backup quarterback and being the guy that's behind Aaron Rodgers on the depth chart is just proving you can manage the game first and foremost. You have to be counted upon to do that before you're counted upon to like step in and win and go lead these scoring drives. So I think for him, you just want to see continued growth. That was his first time playing football in a long time. Can he continue to have more of those good moments and continue to decrease the tough ones?
And to me, with where the quarterback two battle stands right now, to me right now, it's Mason's job at this current moment, based on all we've seen through camp, based on what we saw in the first preseason game in terms of the division of reps we got from all three of those quarterbacks. It doesn't particularly feel crazily close to me right now.
No, I agree. I think that what you saw from Mason Rudolph, the fact that a pass never hit the ground, the
Yep.
only incompletion was the pass to Jeremy Bernard that he caught, but he wasn't able to keep his feet in bounds. That's been the will. I mean, there's too many quarterbacks. That's
There's a lot.
that's been the Mason Rudolph that we've seen during training camp.
Yeah. And that's
And
also
and
been the
I
Mason.
I'm starting to feel like the idea of keeping four quarterbacks is certainly starting to gain some momentum here. Just because I just don't know if that they would even cut Will Howard.
No.
Because I think that they're going to want to, especially after seeing Drew Allar play well, go into next season with the opportunity for Drew and Will to battle it out a little bit. And to have both of those options. I think that they're going to want that, and I don't think that they're going to want to move on from Will. And I also think, as you mentioned, that Mason's pretty clearly ahead. So right now, uh, the idea of four quarterbacks is gaining momentum.
Wow. Wow. You're putting us on the pod right now. You are saying this, uh, definitively is not the word, confidently. You're saying this
I'm
with
not saying anything confident.
I'm kidding. You're floating it out there. I know what you mean, but also you're breaking
I mean,
some
don't you think that
fans.
there's the higher likelihood than
I
when
do.
it was supposed to be Will Howard getting QB2 reps based on what we saw during OTAs. Now all of a sudden Mason steps in. Mason looks like the better quarterback. He is the better quarterback. He's more
Yeah.
experienced. Um,
No, no, I agree. I'm with you too. I do think that, again, it's getting more and more, not as crazy of an idea as initially I think we thought it was, because both you and I kind of came in saying, I don't know if this happens. I
the,
don't
the
know if
tough
they do
thing is
this.
just
It
like
feels,
at some point they're going to have to make a decision. Like, okay, do you cut your seventh round pick, Robert Spears Jennings? Then
yeah, like what
do you
the
cut
numbers
Robert
game.
Tonyan and put him on the practice squad? Uh, do you cut Gabriel Rubio? Do you cut Ryan McCollum?
There's a
Do
lot
you
of,
do you cut like you got it? That's the tough thing about this. Like, I love everybody being like, oh, Robert Tonyan's got to make the team, and also you got to keep four quarterbacks, and like they rattle off all these names of the people that they think are going to make it, and you're like, well, where's the numbers coming from? Where are you going to
yeah.
get this? Like, who's the guy that you're saying this guy's definitely not making it? You only hear the conversation of these people are definitely
Of
making it. You
these,
never hear the
yeah.
opposite.
No, no, you don't. But this is kind of a perfect segue to talk some position battles too, and where kind of things stand, because I am, again, this numbers game is kind of things whittle down here is going to be really interesting. But I think obviously it's nice to have a bigger sample size now where we're looking at things and saying, okay, we have a bigger picture of what the wide receiver three battle looks like here. And this has been interesting because it's funny, you hear a bunch of people talk and say different things, but Roman Wilson still has looked good. And he only had one catch in that first preseason game. And it was a nice catch, too. It was a nice toe tap right on the sideline. But Jeremy Bernard looked phenomenal and really got to showcase you and I think you mentioned this, and this was one of those like, oh yeah, we haven't seen this obviously, but his yards after the catch was such a big strength of his coming into the NFL, and that was a big part of it. But because of the lack of tackling at training camp, we haven't seen him being able to shake guys loose and take it for, what was a 3-yard gain, turn it into a 25-yard gain. So it's still, to me, and I kind of want you to fill in things here. To me, it's still Roman Wilson, but Jeremy Bernard also, again, looked phenomenal. And I think they're going to be used in different situations a lot.
Yeah, I had the same observation. My take on it is that you look at how these guys are used in practice, and pretty clearly, Roman Wilson is the third wide receiver in 11 personnel.
Yeah.
That's just how he's been used throughout training camp, overwhelmingly. Okay. But you look at the game, and Jeremy Bernard was the more impressive player. Now, some of that's because he's new and he's fresh, but there is, I guess, just a small part of you that's sitting there saying, okay, we've heard of Roman having these good practices, having good training camps, and it not translating onto the field. I think you just would like to see more production from him in this next preseason game to support the argument that he's taken a big step forward. I think that he has. I think that this even has looked like a much different training camp to me than a year ago when we were trying to kind of find highlights and kind of drum up a little bit. But still, like I want to see more from Roman in the games to be like, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I've been seeing all training camp.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a big opportunity for that to happen against the Jets. And obviously, we don't entirely know the game plan from Mike McCarthy in terms of how much these guys are going to play and what's expected. But I do expect the Steelers to look to see a lot more from him.
Yeah, it doesn't look like DK and Pittman are going to play.
Yeah, no. And so I think that, again, this is going to kind of be that big, hey, can we see more of what we've been seeing out on the field? And I think we will, too. I think that it was a lot more of just the openness that we saw from Jeremy Bernard, and he was open in a lot of situations, and both Mason Rudolph and Will Howard really did connect with him well. So can they get more from Roman Wilson? Of course. Let's talk running backs, because I don't think that I anticipated coming into training camp where Caleb Johnson is right now at the bottom of the depth chart in the running back room.
Yeah, I think that the running back 3 competition is still a bit unsettled, but Caleb Johnson certainly looks like he's trending towards being cut. He just frankly does. I mean, so he got 2 carries, 3 yards, and truly the only time that I recognized Caleb Johnson in that game was when he was getting screamed at by the special teams coach for making a mistake. That was the only time that I noticed him in the game. As for the other guys in that competition, Travis Homer and Lou Nichols, I mean, if you're talking about just pure running back, to me, Lou Nichols looks like the better running back. I really liked his patience. I like his burst. He looks like he picked up right where he left off last year in the preseason when he was a preseason darling. On the flip side, Travis Homer, as an actual running back, kind of underwhelmed. I felt like he didn't pick up that blitz that led to the sack of Mason Rudolph when he got the ball. I didn't see a lot of juice and a lot of things that made me excited with him with the ball in his hand. But ultimately, the third running back on your depth chart is going to get their helmet largely because of special teams. And Travis Homer is a special teams ace. So I guess the question is just, are they okay with a situation where they've got a great 1-2 punch with Rico Dowdle and Jaylen Warren? Those guys are going to get virtually every single carry And so they're okay just carrying a guy that's mostly a special teamer as their third running back. Or, do you feel like you want a little bit more out of that position?
And it's interesting too, because going back to kind of what we were saying before about the numbers game, but I feel like there's a lot of depth players who it's like, well, he might just be a special teamer, and you can look across all the positions, and obviously you need that, but I feel like there's almost a surplus of that on this roster where, okay, you have Caden Weegan, and he was drafted because he's this gadget guy, and you have Ben Skoranek, who obviously can make plays as a wide receiver, but at the same time is kind of more of that special teamer guy and the gunner, and just I feel like at some point you need depth. At some point you need just guys that are talented that yes also contribute and play well on special teams. I feel like there's almost a surplus of these guys in a way on this roster
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and Caden Weegan kind of surprised me. I had kind of been down on him.
Mm,
What we saw from him there is not what we had seen during training camp.
no.
And I think that Mike McCarthy kind of hinted at that when he was asked about Caden Weegan. He was like, frankly, we need more of it.
Mm,
Um, so I think that they still, I'm curious. He's going to be one of the guys that I'm going to be watching this next game to see, was it, one throw, catch and run that clicked, or is he going to continue to prove that he's not just like a return guy? Let's talk about a couple more, Jenna. Maxi Onachor. When I wrote like before the season about camp position battles, I didn't even put right tackle because I figured, Max is going to take time. The staff had kind of suggested that they were willing to take their time with him because they felt pretty comfortable with Dylan Cook. He looked really good in pads, but is he going to be healthy enough to be part of this competition?
yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, obviously, as he's dealing with that upper body, neck,
I think it's
whatever,
neck.
shoulder, neck, yeah, whatever the we'll use hockey terms here. Upper body injury. We'll be
Yeah.
nice and broad. Uh it's unfortunate because again, he had been looking so great, and you did start to feel like, hey, there might be an opportunity here for him to make some noise, for him to really push and compete for this starting job. Mike McCarthy, when we talked with him on Monday at this point, again, what day early on, um, he basically, said he unfortunately probably isn't going to be ready this week. There could, depending on what happened, he didn't want to completely be like, no, but it seems to be
Seems unlikely.
yeah, it seems like we're not going to see Max Tour this week. So you have to wonder when he's going to come back from this injury and how much he can push because again, he had been really, really impressive. There have been so many moments in a lot of the one-on-one drills when the offensive line worked against the defensive line where you said, wow, oh my gosh, like there is so much here. He obviously is a rookie, and there are some moments where, okay, yeah, TJ Watt is really taking it to him, but there weren't moments to me that felt like, wow, he is out of place. Wow, he looks like a rookie. He looked good, and you assume that he wants to build on that and continue there. And again, not being able to be fully working with working in all the drills and everything because of this injury is unfortunate. So just how soon can he get back and how much can he push is kind of what I'm really going to be watching for.
Yeah, definitely. I'll touch on this other offensive line one, and then let's flip over to the defensive side. I think Spencer Anderson still leads Brock Hoffman in this competition.
Mm,
And I'm curious to see, I think this will be a big moment for both of those guys in this next game. At
yep.
practice on Friday, the Steelers tinkered with some different combinations up front, and some of that included putting Brock Hoffman with the first team offense. But still, overwhelming, or for the most part, it's still Spencer Anderson. And I think it's still his job to lose at this point. Let's flip over, though, Landon Roberts. That's just going to get people ready. They're going to want to run through a brick wall
He's
for
back.
Landon Roberts. The question really is, where is his place on the depth chart, right?
Yep.
Because we were talking a minute ago about you have to, if you're going to keep 4 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends and 6 wide receivers, you got to get a number from somewhere else. I thought at one point before they added Landon Roberts, it was going to be just 4 inside linebackers. Then they
Yep.
signed Landon Roberts. So I mean, Malik Harrison's gone, basically. There's
Yeah.
seems like there's zero chance that he's going to be making this football team. And so really the question is Landon Roberts now basically stepping in and replacing him? Or can he challenge Peyton Wilson for that starting job in the base defense standing next to Patrick Queen?
Yeah, and that's something too that when we kind of started to see how this inside linebacker rotation was in the base and what they were in, we were looking and I said, it's Peyton Wilson. He's here. And that was kind of a little bit of a surprise for me because he's talked so much about wanting to be a 3 down back and wanting to be able to be out there and just the questions surrounding that. And obviously, working on his run defense has been a big part of this, but what do the Steelers feel? Do they feel like they're impressed with what they've seen from Peyton Wilson when it comes to stopping the run, or are they going to have a Landon Roberts come kind of be this guy? I also kind of had to laugh because, of course, his first practice was the day of the biggest fight of training camp that we saw in Latrobe up to this point, and someone asked Mike McCarthy about that on Monday. Just was like, "Hey, he's back. All of a sudden, is this turned up?" But I mean, he is kind of that guy. He is that player that really, is that I go back to 2 years ago, the Dallas Sunday night game where he made that he forced that fumble, just an absolute thud. Ironically enough, it was on Rico Dowdle when Mike McCarthy was coaching the Cowboys. But like that to me kind of sums up who Landon Roberts is as a player. So yeah, what's going to be his role here as we kind of continue to see in these next couple practices and obviously when he gets out there on Friday night against the Jets, just like what are we going to see from him?
Yeah, I mean, I I think that they would love if Peyton Wilson proves that he can be an every down kind of guy and
Yeah.
takes another step forward. Um, but I think some of that's going to sort itself out because he is a leaner type body type, and when he's going up against a physical guard, there's a difference between a Landon Roberts taking on that guard or Peyton Wilson. It's just the way that it is. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that's going to be. And some of it could just be like opponent specific. Like if they play the Ravens, maybe
Yeah.
Landon Roberts plays that game. If they play a team that's more of a wide open passing attack that occasionally is going to be in their base, maybe they feel comfortable enough with Peyton Wilson taking some of those snaps. So, it could be opponent specific. It could evolve as the season unfolds, depending on if Peyton Wilson continues to show what we've seen in training camp and continues to take that step forward, or if they get into a game situation and they're like, okay, this is not going the way that we had hoped with Peyton. So I think that that's something that could evolve and something to keep an eye on throughout the season.
I do have a funny Landon Roberts story from the locker room a couple years ago. It was toward the end of the season, and we were waiting to talk to Alex Highsmith in the locker room, whose locker was like one or two over from a Landon Roberts, and all the guys have chairs in front of their lockers. And so naturally, the scrums can get kind of a little bit big, as people tend to know. So I'm on the outskirts of the scrum, and I'm trying to make sure I'm like moved away from a Landon Roberts who was sitting in his chair. And after the interview with Alex ended, he looked at me and he's an intimidating guy. He just looked at me and like stone face was just like, "Did you fart?" And I just was like stopped in my tracks. I was like, "No, absolutely not." And he just like stared at me, nothing, like just no reaction for a good couple seconds. And then just goes, "Nah, I'm just playing." And I was like, "Oh, I've never been floored more in that moment where I'm like, no, absolutely not." But yeah, that's, so
There
as
are
someone,
sometimes our media is pretty disgusting. There are people that do fart in the middle of a scrum, and you could
oh
probably
my
guess who that might be.
God. We'll let you guys guess who that is. And on that note, thanks so much for joining us on this week's edition of the Insiders Podcast. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get all your podcasts. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Give us 5-star review, or give us 5-star rating. Give us a nice review. Tell your friends about the podcast. Check Mike's workout in The Athletic. Watch WPXI Channel 11 for sports. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for joining us.